We're really fortunate to have and honored to have Ambassador Zhou Wenzhong here today. And I wanted to recognize the group that Ambassador Zhou is traveling with. His lovely wife, Madam Xie Shumin, who's done a fine job, I should say. Anybody who knows about diplomacy knows that it's a team effort, and she has done a fine job of representing in the United States, the People's Republic of China. We also have Minister Counselor for Education, Yo Xiaozhong is here. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. And someone who really helps the PRC embassy work, and someone that I worked with in Washington, Mr. Zhang Maoming, who does all the logistics and everything else, and I really appreciate his assistance. So welcome to all of you, everybody in the entourage. It's my great honor and privilege to introduce to you Ambassador Zhou, someone I had the great privilege and honor to work closely with while I was in Washington, because he was working with my bosses, and I had the pleasure of attending many meetings with him. As you know, Ambassador Zhou, since 2005, has been Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the People's Republic of China to the United States of America. He has trained, in addition to one university in China that I had the good luck of attending in Beijing. He has trained at Bath University and the London School of Economics in the UK. He started what is a really storied career in the foreign ministry as an English language interpreter for Chinese leaders. And prior to being appointed ambassador to the United States, he held many important positions in the foreign ministry at home in the PRC and also abroad, including being Deputy Consul General for the PRC in San Francisco, Consul General in Los Angeles, Minister and Deputy Chief of Mission in Washington, D.C. on another tour, Ambassador to Australia, and Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing. And obviously his current position as Ambassador to the United States is among the most important foreign policy positions in the People's Republic of China. And I think that it's a very important position not only for China, but it's a very important position for the United States itself. As I've said in this room to some people who are in this audience, I believe U.S.-China relations are on a very good track over the last few years in particular. And I think that one of the major reasons is that the PRC has a very highly talented group of people in the United States who understand the United States and can convey that understanding back to their home capital in Beijing. Because when we're dealing with issues on which there are clearly common interests and we need to improve our cooperation, it's very, very important to have that understanding and convey that understanding. And when we're dealing with issues where we quite frankly have big differences and need to manage those differences, it's also very, very important to have that understanding and convey that understanding. Another good sign of leadership, and Ambassador Zhou shows this in many ways, is what you leave for the next generation as a legacy in any post that you have. And I can tell you from having worked with many of Ambassador Zhou's deputies, etc., that he has a very fine crew indeed working at the embassy in Washington and at the consulates around this country. And they would visit Washington and we would visit them. And that's very important because the next generation has to carry the message and the model that Ambassador Zhou has set up on the language side, on the cultural understanding side. And Ambassador Zhou has been tireless in traveling around the United States to understand American society. And I'll just say as a last note, on a personal level, I went into the government as an academic. I was a novice. I did not have a great deal of experience. And I learned a great deal from getting to spend time with the true professionals like Ambassador Zhou, and he was always extremely gracious to me on a professional and a personal level while I was in Washington, and I wanted to thank him publicly at this time for that. So please join me in welcoming Ambassador Zhou. We very much look forward to your comments, and after you're finished speaking, we'll have some time for question and answer. Thank you very much, sir.
Madam President, Professor Christensen, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be invited to your very prestigious campus and to speak to this prestigious audience. And I really very happy to be back. I was here once before in the 80s, and I saw many changes. And Princeton is a household name in China, and I want to thank you for taking very good care of our students. And I also want to congratulate you on all the academic accomplishments you have made over the years. And so you can always count on our embassy and our consulate in New York for still greater exchanges with the Chinese education institutions. And I also want to thank Professor Christensen for his cooperation when we were in Washington working together for managing our relations. I really enjoy working with him, and we are sorry to see him leaving at the end of his tour of duty in Washington. So it is a great pleasure for me to speak at the well-known Princeton University. So let me use this opportunity to talk about the latest economic development in China and China-U.S. relations in the new era. I'm sure we are all feeling the impact of the current economic and financial crisis, which is as serious as it is global. Starting in the financial sector, it has affected the real economy and continues to spread, posing the most serious challenge to the world economy since the Great Depression, and dealing a heavy blow on the economy of every country and the lives of people all around the world. According to the global economic prospects released by the World Bank on March 31st, global GDP is expected to contract by 1.7%. The IMF's World Economic Outlook released on April 22nd projected 1.3% decline in the world economy. This crisis has proven once again that economic globalization has linked us closely together. Countries are interdependent and interests are intertwined to an unprecedented degree, forming a community of interests where it is not easy to tell your interests from ours. No country can stay immune from the international financial crisis or overcome its impact on one's own. It is urgent for the international institutions and every country in the world to continue taking all measures necessary to restore market confidence as soon as possible. Only when the international community strengthens cooperation and makes concerted effort will the crisis be managed effectively. In other words, we are in the same boat and everyone must row hard. Following the summit on financial markets and the world economy that brought the leaders of G20 countries together in Washington, D.C. last November, the second G20 financial summit was held in London early this month. This summit yielded a number of positive results that will help boost market confidence and facilitate the recovery and growth of world economy at an early date. Ladies and gentlemen, the international financial crisis has presented China with great challenges in economic and social development, including a sharp decline in exports due to continuous contraction of external demand, greater difficulties in stabilizing agricultural production and increasing farmers' income, overcapacity in some industries, slow recovery in industrial growth, continued drop of economic returns, reduction in fiscal revenue, and the severe pressure of employment. In face of this crisis, the Chinese government has responded vigorously and responsibly. We have made swift and decisive adjustments to our macroeconomic policies, adopted a proactive fiscal policy and a moderately relaxed monetary policy, and introduced a package plan to ensure steady and relatively fast economic growth. These measures have proven essential for easing major problems in the economy, shoring up confidence, and stabilizing expectations. The main contents of the package plan are: first, boost domestic demand in a comprehensive way, strengthen the role of consumer demand in driving economic growth, and promote balanced economic development. Our policies are primarily aimed at boosting domestic demand, and we have been working hard to maintain relatively fast growth in investment, stimulate consumption, and readjust the structure of domestic and external demand. While mainly relying on domestic demand, we are making full use of external demand at the same time so that they can work together to drive our economic growth. Our goal is forming a more balanced growth pattern. Second, improve infrastructure across the country and promote coordinated economic development. Uneven development between urban and rural areas and between different regions is an acute problem in China's economic and social development. But it also means tremendous potential for further economic growth. The government has introduced a 2-year 4 trillion yuan investment plan, in which priorities are given to rural development and infrastructure projects in central and western China. We will speed up the construction of key projects of farmland improvement and water conservancy, build rural road network, upgrade power grids, promote standardization in the construction of primary and secondary schools, and improve rural living conditions. We will also speed up the development of major transportation infrastructure. It is particularly important to build coal transport routes, trunk railway lines, and airports in Western China, so that the advantages of Central and Western China can be fully brought out. We will vigorously support government-subsidized housing projects, with priorities on low-income urban families and families living in shanty towns in forest region, reclaimed areas, and around coal mines. Third, enhance industrial competitiveness and the capacity of independent innovation and promote sustainable economic development. We have adopted plans for the restructuring and the rejuvenation of 10 key industries, such as automobile and steel. These are measures to support enterprises to accelerate technological innovation, phase out backward production facilities, and promote advanced productive forces. We are speeding up the implementation of the outline of the national program for medium and long-term scientific and technological development, and focusing on making breakthroughs in a number of core technologies and the key generic technologies. We will increase input in key forest shelter belts, protection of natural forests, urban sewage and garbage treatment facilities, and major energy conservation and pollution reduction projects. A massive tax cut program has been introduced, which will save businesses and individuals about 500 billion yuan in tax each year. Fourth, work for all-round development of the people and promote intensive economic development. It is a strategic priority in China's long-term development to achieve the all-round development of the people in the course of boosting domestic demand. We have given priority to education, healthcare, and social security when allocating public resources. We are in the process of formulating a national medium and long-term program for education, which will substantially increase input in education. We are pressing ahead with medical and healthcare reform, and will put in place a basic medical care system and a basic drug system, and improve the community-level medical and health service system. We are improving the social safety net at a faster pace for expanding coverage of social security programs. We are doing everything in our power to create jobs, especially for college graduates and the rural migrant workers. As Premier Wen Jiabao of China stressed on many occasions, the package plan is aimed at addressing both symptoms and the root causes, and serving both current needs and the long-term goals. It is an emergency response plan to ensure economic growth, improve people's livelihood, and maintain social stability. It also represents a long-term policy to promote scientific and harmonious development of the Chinese economy. To our satisfaction, the package plan is already paying off. The positive changes have taken place in the economy. China's GDP grew by 6.1% in the first quarter of this year. Total fixed assets investment rose by 28.8%. Retail sales of consumer goods increased by 15.9%. Thanks to the Home Appliance to the Countryside program and the lower taxes for small engine cars, production and sales of household appliances and agro-machinery grew by a large margin, and auto sales reached a record high. The first quarter also saw 2.68 million new jobs created in urban areas. There is sufficient liquidity in the banking system, and the financial markets have been performing smoothly. Public confidence has become stronger, and the market expectations have improved. China is in the process of rapid industrialization and urbanization. Demand is enormous, and the potential for economic growth is huge. 30 years of reform and opening up have laid down a solid material, scientific, technological, and system foundation. And there is also ample supply of fund and labor force. We will steadfastly carry out the proactive fiscal policy and a moderately relaxed monetary policy, and implement the package plan designed to address the current crisis so as to minimize the impact of the financial crisis, facilitate steady and relatively fast economic growth in China, and continue to contribute to the international efforts to safeguard global financial stability and promote world economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, on January the 1st, 1979, China and the United States established diplomatic relationship at the ambassadorial level. Our two countries celebrated the 30th anniversary earlier this year. After 30 years of hard work, China-U.S. relationship has become one of the most dynamic and influential bilateral relationships in the world. A new era of China-U.S. relationship has begun. The following figures are self-evident. In 1979, there was no high-level visits between our two countries, except Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping's trip to the United States at the invitation of President Carter. In recent years, the presidents of our two countries met several times a year and exchanged views frequently by phone and letters. President Hu Jintao and President Obama have already talked on the phone twice. Earlier this month, they had a successful meeting in London alongside the G20 Financial Summit, and they reached an important agreement on the development of China-U.S. relationship in the new era. President Obama has accepted President Hu Jintao's invitation to visit China later this year. Starting from scratch, China and the United States established more than 60 bilateral dialogue consultation, and cooperation mechanisms. In light of the latest developments, the two governments have decided to integrate the China-U.S. Strategic Economic Dialogue and the China-U.S. Strategic Dialogue to establish a new mechanism, China-U.S. Strategic and Economic Dialogue. The first round of dialogue under the new mechanism will be held in Washington, D.C. coming summer. The trade between China and the United States was less than $250 billion US dollars. At the same time, our two countries established diplomatic relations. By 2008, our trade has grown 130 times and exceeded $333 billion US dollars. We also maintain consultation and cooperation in other bilateral areas and on major international and regional issues. There are 35 pairs of sister provinces and states and 144 pairs of sister cities between China and the United States. In 2008, over 2.5 million people traveled between China and the United States. There are over 90,000 Chinese students in the United States and over 19,000 American students in China. Such a historic development is beyond the wildest imagination of even the most optimistic prophet of China-U.S. relationship 30 years ago. Anyone who knows the Chinese culture well must have heard this before. At 30, one starts firm. In life, 30 years of age is a crucial linchpin. For China-U.S. relationship, 30 years of development have brought it to a new historical starting point. There are major opportunities ahead for developing U.S.-China relationship. Our shared interests have increased and the foundation for the bilateral relationship is stronger. President Nixon said during his visit to China in February 1972, "We were enemies. Today we have major differences. What has brought us together is the common interests that transcend the differences." In short, in early 1970s, it was our shared strategic interests that pushed us to reach across the Pacific and put 25 years of mutual estrangement behind us. When the Cold War came to an end, some assumed that China-U.S. relationship was at a crossroad. They were skeptical that this relationship would last. But experience has proved that under the new international situation, China and the United States have found more shared strategic interests and broad areas for cooperation. The shared interests of China and the United States are mainly reflected in the following aspects. First, maintain world peace and stability. China and the United States are permanent members of the UN Security Council and the world's biggest developing country and the biggest developed country, respectively. We shoulder major responsibilities for maintaining world peace and stability on many international issues such as counterterrorism and non-proliferation, and in many parts of the world, from the Korean Peninsula and Iran to the Middle East and Darfur, China and the United States need to cooperate more closely. Second, promote sustainable global development. As to major economies of the world, China and the United States contribute over 30% of world economic growth, and therefore have significant impact on world economic stability and growth. The current financial and economic crisis has further highlighted the importance of maintaining the stability of Chinese and American economies. Our two countries have implemented large-scale stimulus plans, respectively, and have strengthened cooperation and the dialogue on tackling the crisis. There are also broad prospects and enormous potential for us to work together to to address energy, environment, and the climate change issues, maintain the free trade system in the world, and bridge the North-South gap. Third, intensify bilateral economic cooperation and trade, strengthen the win-win structure, and bring tangible benefit to our peoples. Number 4, increase the friendship between our two peoples and uphold world diversity. As colorful and multicultural nations, the Chinese and the American peoples have a strong desire to know more about each other, and hence the increasingly vibrant and in-depth social and cultural exchanges. At the same time, it is important that we must commit ourselves to protecting the cultural identities of our countries and the diversity of the world in the spirit of harmony without uniformity, and seeking common grounds while putting aside differences. Ladies and gentlemen, on April the 1st, 2009, President Hu Jintao and President Obama met in London, where they agreed to work together to build a positive, cooperative, and comprehensive relationship for the 21st century. You must ask, what is positive, cooperative, and comprehensive relationship? These are the three prominent features of the China-U.S. relationship that we are working together to build. First, China-U.S. relationship should be a positive relationship. China and the United States need to view each other from a positive perspective and push forward dialogue and cooperation with positive moves despite the differences in our social systems, historical background, cultural tradition, and the phases of development. When handling the problems in our bilateral relations, we must adhere to the principles of mutual respect and equality, and seek to address the problems through consultations on an equal footing and by seeking common grounds. Second, it should be a cooperative relationship. At a time of increased complexity and volatility in the international situation, there are rising global challenges from traditional and non-traditional security issues such as counterterrorism, non-proliferation of WMD, and the regional conflicts and other issues, including energy, environment, climate change, drug trafficking, epidemic diseases, and natural disasters. Our two great countries face increasing common challenges and shoulder greater and shared responsibilities. It is more important than ever to ensure a healthy, stable, and growing China-U.S. relationship. Our two countries should, through intensified consultation and cooperation, work together to tackle the complicated and thorny issues facing humanity in the 21st century to achieve mutually beneficial cooperation and common development. Third, it should be a comprehensive relationship. In addition to working together on the international financial crisis, China and the United States should deepen exchanges and cooperation in economy, fighting terrorism, non-proliferation, law enforcement, energy, climate change, science and technology, education, culture, and healthcare, and boost exchanges between the military of the two nations. Our two countries should also strengthen communication and coordination on international and regional affairs and global issues, so as to continuously enrich the strategic connotation of our bilateral ties. We need to open up our minds and explore new ways to vigorously encourage dialogue and exchanges between our legislatures, local governments, schools, young people, and the media groups, so as to build up support and the participation for China-U.S. relations. To push for continued progress of China-U.S. relations in the new era, both countries should always approach and manage the bilateral relations from a strategic and long-term perspective, keep the bilateral relations firmly on track, and abide by the principles of the three China-U.S. joint communiques. The three Sino-U.S. joint communiques form the political basis of China-U.S. relationship and provide a guideline to its development. At the center of the three joint communiques is the One China principle. Past experience tells us that to ensure smooth development of China-U.S. relations, we must abide by the principles of the three joint communiques and handle the question that bear on each other's core interests appropriately, such as the Taiwan question and Tibet-related matters, in order to minimize potential disruptions and the damages to our bilateral relations. Ladies and gentlemen, our experience has shown time and again that China and the United States are partners in cooperation, not strategic rivals. Our relationship is a mutually beneficial and a win-win relationship, rather than a zero-sum game. We will both gain from peaceful coexistence and lose if we fall into conflict. Good relationship between China and the United States serves the fundamental interests of both our countries and peoples, and contributes to peace, stability, and prosperity in Asia-Pacific region and the rest of the world. I'm convinced that as long as both China and the United States carry on the good work, approach the bilateral relations from a strategic and long-term perspective, strengthen high-level exchanges and the strategic dialogues, enhance strategic mutual trust, expand mutually beneficial cooperation, respect and accommodate each other's core interests, and handle differences and sensitive issues appropriately, we will surely be able to achieve sustained, sound, and steady development of China-U.S. relations in the new historical era and make greater contribution to the peoples of our two countries and the people of the world. Thank you very much.
The ambassador has graciously offered to take some questions at the conclusion of his talk, and I am going to encourage people who are going to ask questions to come up to the microphones on the side of the auditorium at the bottom of the stairs. And let me ask two things of you. One is please ask a question. Please don't make a speech. Please ask a question. And please limit your question to one question out of courtesy for the other people here, because I'm sure a lot of people would like to raise a question. So please don't ask three, ask one. Thank you very much. Please come on down. Could you come down to the microphones, and if you could line up by the microphones, that would be terrific.
My question is, we are going to negotiate the Copenhagen agreement in the end of this year. So is China willing to negotiate a goal for China on carbon dioxide emissions? Thanks.
First of all, China is working very hard on the reduction of the emission of greenhouse gas. And at its own initiative, China has just decided to improve the energy efficiency, to reduce per unit GDP energy consumption by 20% between 2005 and 2010. That is to reduce the consumption of energy and improve the efficiency of energy use. And China has decided to reduce the emission of major pollutants by 10% between 2005 and 2010. And China is also doing all it can to increase the use of renewable energies. And China will increase the portion of energy generated from nuclear power between 2005 and 2010, I think by a very big margin. Right now, it's less than 10 million kilowatts. And I think by 2020, the plan is to have about 100 million kilowatts sort of generated from nuclear power. So you can see the increase, it will be very big. So now the question is whether or not developing countries like China and developed countries here in Europe and in North America should be expected to sort of undertake the same kind of commitment in terms of the reduction of the carbon dioxide. I think the agreed principle, or rather the principle agreed at the previous round of negotiations, is the same. The developing country and developed countries should bear the same but the differentiated responsibility. So that is the agreed principle during the previous round of negotiations. So we maintain that this same principle should be upheld in the upcoming Copenhagen summit. We also hope developed countries will help developing countries to, in terms of providing funding and providing technologies to help developing countries to improve energy efficiency and to be able to reduce the carbon dioxide emission.
Ambassador, you've laid out Sino-U.S. cooperation and you talk quite a bit, but I'm wondering what, in your view, is the most difficult and potentially disruptive element in U.S.-China relations, and how do you see this issue being not just managed but resolved going forward?
Now, this year marks the 30th anniversary of the normalization of our relations. And 30 years ago, so it is during the Carter administration, relations were normalized because the Carter administration at that time accepted the three conditions forwarded by the Chinese side, namely abrogation of the Joint Defense Pact between the United States and Taiwan, and the termination of the so-called diplomatic ties with Taiwan, and the withdrawing troops stationed in Taiwan. So it is after the Carter administration decided to accept the three conditions that it was possible for the normalization to come true. So that shows when China has always been the centerpiece of U.S.-China relations. And it is the most important principle laid out in the three joint communiques, namely Shanghai Communique and the communique concerning the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the United States, signed in 1979, actually end of 78, and then the 1982 joint communique concerning the sale of weapons to Taiwan by the United States. So if we look back, I think we could come to the conclusion that whenever there were setbacks in our relations, and very often the setbacks were sort of, the setbacks came because the principle of one China was not abided by in words and in deed. So looking into the future, I hope one China principle will be upheld to the letter, faithfully. To be more specific, we hope the United States will handle the question of sell weapons to Taiwan very carefully because in the 1982 joint communique, the United States agreed to reduce in terms, the qualitative and the quantitative terms, the amount of weapons it's going to sell to Taiwan, leading to final resolution. So now it's 2009, so many years have passed since then, and so we still have the problem with us. So we hope the United States will handle this question very carefully. As Deng Xiaoping said, the question of Taiwan is of explosive nature. So if we are not able to manage that issue carefully and successfully, it will have a very negative impact on our overall relations. Of course, there is one change. That is, the cross-strait relations have made progress. I think announcements were made concerning the Taiwan's sort of observer sort of ship in the WHA. And so agreement were reached between two sides. And at the invitation of the Director General of WHO, Taiwan will be able to attend WHA as observer in the name of Chinese Taipei. So I hope the question of Taiwan will be left to the Chinese on two sides because fundamentally speaking, it is China's internal affairs and it brooks no foreign intervention.
Hi, Ambassador. Recently, there have been reports of a man named Gao Zhisheng, who has been imprisoned and tortured. He's a human rights lawyer who is known for representing underground Christians and practitioners of Falun Gong in China. And I was wondering how you saw the Chinese government's persecution of human rights activists like Mr. Gao and the impact of that on diplomatic relations with the U.S.
In China, I think we have in the Chinese Constitution the provision of protecting human rights have been written into the Constitution. And for China, as China is a still developing country, so the right to subsistence is the number one human rights issue for the Chinese people. And China now is a country we respect law, and is a country which is ruled by law. And I think no one would be prosecuted if he abides by the law in China. So I think that is the sort of the situation in China. So in the specific case of Mr. Gao, I'm not familiar with the specifics of his case. But I believe no one would be prosecuted simply because he holds views which are different from the views of the government.
You talked about the WHA observer status for Taiwan just a little bit ago, and I was wondering if you could talk more about what brought about the about phase in letting Taiwan into an international organization, and what the fact that Beijing let Taipei become an observer in the WHA might mean for future representation in an organization like the UN.
First of all, no matter what the progress we have made across straits relations, one China principle will not change. As a matter of fact, the great majority of the countries in the world recognize People's Republic China, government of People's Republic China as the sole legal government representing entire China. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have made a lot of progress in the cross-strait relations. And President Hu Jintao made a 6-point proposal at the end of last year in a speech marking the 30th anniversary of the message to the Taiwan compatriots, a message from the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. In that 6-point proposal, he made a point that we understand the desire of the people in Taiwan for more international space under the premise of One China. So I think under the premise of One China, I think the two sides, through discussion, can work out proper arrangements which are consistent, compatible to Taiwan's status. So that's why we've seen progress that has been made in terms of Taiwan's participation in WHA. Again, I want to say there will be no change in One China principle, and the United Nations is an intergovernmental organization whose membership calls for sort of sovereign countries. Only sovereign states could be members. So I think that's that is quite obvious.
During this time of economic crisis, many countries will be tempted to raise protectionist barriers, and this could threaten China's incredible export successes. What do you believe is the best strategy for China to counter protectionism by foreign countries against exports?
I think actually at the G20, both in Washington and in London, the leaders of the G20 agree that the countries in the world should work together to fend off, protectionism, because they all agree that protectionism is not an answer to the problem we are all confronted with. On the contrary, protectionism will only make things even worse. So that is agreement, consensus reached at both G20 summits. So I hope we will be able to follow that up. Countries represented at both G20s and other countries will follow that up. On the other hand, of course, trade frictions are unavoidable, even when the economic situation is much better than it is now. We saw trade frictions and disputes. So what matters here is how these disputes and frictions should be managed, should be resolved. And between China and the United States, we have set up a number of mechanisms, such as JCCT, that a joint commission on commerce and trade. So we hope trade disputes could be resolved through discussions, consultations using this mechanism, rather than initiating trade remedy issues, which could easily lead to a confrontation, a trade war. And obviously, that's the last what we need. Yeah.
I'd like to ask you about North Korea. China voted for a presidential statement from the UN Security Council, which North Korea has condemned. North Korea now says the UN Security Council must apologize to it, or it will proceed with new measures, including hints that it will test a nuclear weapon and it will build a nuclear reactor. China's trade with North Korea increased by over 40% last year, according to figures. Is China prepared, if North Korea continues with this belligerent approach, to adopt sanctions towards North Korea? And what would China do if North Korea actually does test a nuclear weapon?
I think our position is quite clear. China has, supported the statement, the chairman's statement, and China hopes North Korea would agree to come back to the negotiating table. And we think the six-party talks are the only effective way for finding a solution to the North Korean nuclear issue. At the moment, I think all parties concerned should handle the issue with great prudence. And sanctions are not what we need now. Of course, in the statement, the members of Security Council agreed to resume the 1718 committee. So the committee is doing its work, and we have expressed our support for the measures the committee has decided to take, but we hope there will be no further sort of measures intended, because this is not a moment for parties concerned to take further actions. I think we need to wait and see the results of the measures which are being planned. And in the meantime, I think we need to continue to talk to North Korea. And for that matter, we are encouraging the United States to talk to North Korea directly. And I think this is an issue which can only be resolved through very patient diplomatic negotiations rather than through confrontation.
Hi, I wanted to get back to the issue of climate change and Copenhagen. In addition to the principle you mentioned, which all parties agreed upon, the common but differentiated responsibilities principle, China and the group of 77 industrializing nations have also put forward another principle, that is that developing countries should not take on binding emissions, carbon dioxide emissions reductions commitments. Is this a principle that China sees as absolutely firm, or is this something that China might be willing to modify in a 2009 treaty at Copenhagen, or in fact do we have to wait for China to reach a certain development level before it will be willing to take on emissions reductions commitments?
I think countries are still very much very much divided on this issue. Even the United States and European countries don't agree with one another on this issue. So there is a lot of work to be done, yet to be done. And between now and December, there is still a lot of time. And I understand that there will be leaders' meeting for the major economies countries, back to G8+5. And so there will be 3 preparatory meetings leading to that leaders' meeting, which will take place in Italy. And all these issues will be discussed. And I hope eventually there will be a consensus. But I want to emphasize, unless the interests of all parties are taken into consideration, it will be difficult for all parties to agree to a very balanced, to agree to some kind of formula. Because if you want the Copenhagen conference to be successful, we really need to work out a balanced formula which would take care of the interests of all countries. Yeah.
Hi, I wonder if you may elaborate a bit on how China is looking at healthcare reform and whether steps will be taken to make the model of healthcare similar to that of Western Europe and the U.S.
Yeah. We have just started the healthcare reform. The Ministry of Public Health has made an announcement of that reform plan. And the government is going to spend 850 billion RMB yuan in the next 3 years for the reform. Governments at all levels, not just central government. So government at all levels will spend altogether 850 billion yuan, RMB yuan for that reform. Basically, what we want to do is to develop a national healthcare system which would cover everybody, which would be able to provide very basic healthcare even for rural population. Because before, in the rural areas, we didn't have any system, healthcare system for the people in the rural areas. We also want to develop a network of healthcare at neighborhood, at the level of neighborhood, so that the people don't have to go to big hospitals for minor sort of illness. What you have here is a family doctor system. So the family doctor will take care of the healthcare needs for the whole family. So I think that's what we want to introduce in China, so that we'll have a general practitioner sort of working at a grassroots level, and so leaving the big hospitals with enough time and resources for major problems.
Hi. Actually, I have a question about the finance and economy. As everyone knows, as a G20, China proposed a new international reserve currency. And I just want to know what's the initiative behind that. And does that mean China wants to claim a change in the world economy, or is there a new detailed plan to carry out, or is it just a conceptual framework?
Yeah, that's a point made by the governor of the People's Bank. I think it's for scholarly sort of exploration of the issue. It's a view held by many scholars, and he is one of them. And for a long time to come, I think U.S. dollars will still be the sort of international reserve currency. So that, I think that will not change for a long time. Yeah.
I think we'll take two more, and we'll let the ambassador have a rest.
First, I'd like to thank you and your countrymen for buying the bonds that are paying my Social Security. And I wonder if if it's going to be 20 years before you return to Princeton, I wonder if you could just speculate or imagine China's role in the world 20 years from now when you come back as President Zhou.
I take it as a compliment. Thank you. China is still a developing country. This is quite obvious because we have a very large population. Although the size of our economy is getting very big, but in per capita terms, China is way behind many of the countries in the world. And also the development in China is very uneven. So that is to say, you will see places like Shanghai, Beijing, which enjoys very high level of development. But you will find also places in the interior provinces, in the northwest, in northeast, southwest, where development is still at a very low level. So China is a very diversified country. So you will find so all kinds of problems. You will find in developed countries. You will also find problems which you will only find in developing countries. So I think this will be with us for a long time to come. So I think our leaders are very conscious of this. So, being a developing country, we understand it will take a long time for China to develop. And our strategy for development is a peaceful one. And China's development will not pose a threat to any countries. And so that's our foreign policy is a peaceful, independent foreign policy. And the purpose of foreign policy is to maintain world peace and to and work for common development. And the development in China will also be sustainable. And so the emphasis is no longer on speed and rather on all-round sort of balanced development. And it puts more emphasis on quality of the development. And so that's the kind of change you are seeing, which is taking place in China. So in 20 years' time, I think China will still be a developing country because others will make progress too. So we hope we'll be able to catch up, but it will be not easy. And I don't think we'll be able to finish the catching up in 20 years. Yeah.
Thank you. I came from China 3 months ago, and I'm a visiting professor in chemical engineering department in Princeton. When I arrived here, I got a lot of help from the people here. I'm very happy. Only several weeks ago, there is another conference held here, focused on the how to grow out of financial crisis. If our Premier Wenzhong is here, he would be happy that American people are working hard to make sure the security of Chinese investment in United States. But my friends and our people in China don't know that. Another example is that in the past recent years, the recycle economy and clean production have been rapidly developed in China. For example, we have achieved chromite clean production in China. But several days ago, I read an article in New York Times. They still discussed the heavy polluted traditional position of chromite production. So my question is that the ordinary people lack to know each other. Is there any positive way for the people, ordinary people, for their ordinary life to know better for each other? Another example is that when I arrived in the United States, I find that the trash, the recycle and the reuse, the trash system is well developed. But in China, we don't know that, how American people, our friends, how they deal their daily life trash. If we have some ways for the two countries, for the ordinary people to know each other better, I think both of us want to achieve a better living. That would be helpful. Do you have some suggestion about that?
I don't know what to say.
Do you disagree?
It is true. It also sometimes sort of puzzles me. But of course, on the other hand, the journalists feel that's their job to criticize. So they see, that's what the journalism means here in this country, and in maybe North America and Europe, I think that's how they are doing their job. But of course, I hope the criticism will be done in a constructive way, in an objective way, so that the people will have a complete perception of what is going on. And but obviously, we do have something missing here, and of course, we hope there will be more exchanges, people-to-people exchanges at all levels, between universities, between cities, between Chinese provinces and U.S. States. So we are very happy that there are more Americans going to China and more Chinese coming to this country. I think, basically speaking, the relations between countries need to be supported by people's commitment to that relationship. And only when people understand each other better will they, work for, more, still closer ties. And I'm very confident about this relationship because I think our two countries share many common interests. And people at a grassroots level, they are all very friendly with one another. If you go to China, you will find that, and for people who come to the United States, they will see this very obviously, very visible. So then the question is why some of the journalists don't see this. So that's a question for me and these journalists. But I hope. But I also saw changes in the reporting. It varies from time to time, and it varies from paper to paper. So I don't want to generalize.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I want to. Let me say one word about the last exchange, which I find very meaningful. We have a gentleman who's here as an exchange scholar in the United States talking about people-to-people contacts, and I think that's so important to the future of the relationship. And Ambassador Zhou's answer is very important. And I have a lot of students in this room who have heard me talk about this. Someone like Ambassador Zhou in the United States who can relay the message back to Beijing that the news coverage of China is of a type that is shared in news coverage toward other countries, and including the U.S. government itself, which I served in, that journalism is critical in the United States, and it's part of the heritage of journalism in the United States, and that maybe not too much should be read into every negative article. And that kind of message is very, very important. He's worked extremely hard to understand this country, and in the process, he has really assisted in improving U.S.-China relations, and I really thank him for his service, and I thank him very much for coming here today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.